Hello.
Hello, Tim. So welcome to a new episode of Catalog and Cocktails, and we're going to do it a little bit differently here. We're playing around, we're figuring this out as we go, and today we want to be able to have more interaction with people and stuff. So this is like a regular Zoom meeting, I think. So just FYI, if your we want to record this first 30 minutes, so you can turn off your cameras and please just unmute yourself. We will unmute everybody and stuff. Then after the 30 minutes, we will turn recording off, and then we will just kind of keep whoever wants to hang around and just kind of keep the discussion going. That's what we're going to be here for. So just as a reminder, if you have your camera on, that's totally fine, but we are recording right now, and we just appreciate if you can just keep yourself unmuted, and then we'll open the floor later on.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, and if you're not familiar with Catalog and Cocktails, this is all about talking about data, hanging out live. We do a little networking afterwards, tasty beverage in hand, and good conversations. So feel free to chime in on the Slack with any questions you have along the way, and hang out afterwards to kind of chat, kind of freeform.
So today we decided to have a special guest. Our great friend and colleague, Mr. Bryon Jacob. How are you doing, Bryon?
Hey, doing great. Thanks for having me. I've been lurking the last couple times, but I was just off camera watching you guys. I had a drink in my hand, but you couldn't see me. So I'm glad to actually join you on the camera today.
So cheers, everybody. Hopefully everybody's enjoying their mid-Wednesday. So I'm doing something really weird. I went to Twin Liquors and I found this syrup, passion fruit syrup, because I like to do my old fashioned. So I'm just playing around with it.
Oh, that's cool.
I did an old fashioned with this as a syrup and a Colombian rum called Dictador, and that's what I'm playing around with. It's interesting. I'll have to go like that.
You're not sure you love it yet?
I'm not sure, but I'm experimenting. That's what we're doing nowadays.
That's kind of cool. I'm doing something kind of similar. My wife got some cocktails through this thing called Sourced. I guess they do delivery craft cocktails. And so I'm drinking, it's called the Evening Standard. And so it's rye whiskey with apricot simple syrup and then some bitters. So it's like 2 ounces of whiskey to like 3/4 ounce of syrup. So it's pretty good.
How about you, Bryon?
All right. Well, I'm doing. Juan makes fun of me because he knows, like, basically for the last couple of months, I've just been sticking with the exact same cocktail almost every time. If I'm not drinking just straight whiskey, I've been drinking the same thing. I've been drinking a rye mule. So a good rye or a decent rye, too good in the mix. Lime juice, and then the key is like having a really good ginger beer. So this is from Cock and Bull, which is a bar in Hollywood that claims that they invented the Moscow Mule and they brew their own ginger beer to make those with. So I've been mixing up rye mules, and I've jokingly said to a lot, this is my COVID drink. This is basically I made this cocktail like a few days before we all kind of went into shelter in place, and I've just been keep getting the ingredients for this and making this over and over again. So.
Cool. Well, for folks who are online, if you want to share in the chat where are you guys from and what are you drinking, that would be cool. Somebody said, has anyone visited the Whiskey Vault at the Wizard Academy? I have not.
I don't think so. What's the Wizard Academy?
Yeah, I've been to a lot of whiskey places in Scotland, but not that.
Another person says that they've heard it's amazing.
Oh, so it's here in town. Okay, cool. We're gonna go check it out. So yeah, it'd be fun. If people in the chat wanted to share where they're from and where they're drinking, that'd be cool. But let's start. I mean, so when we had this first idea of catalogs and cocktails and just talking about data in general, I think one of the cool things was just kind of sharing stories of things that we've kind of gone through in our lives about working in large scale data scenarios and stuff. And when I met Bryon several years ago, it was really, really cool to see Bryon's story. And it was kind of like so Bryon is one of the founders of data.world, but he spent like, I don't know, a decade at HomeAway. And he was just telling me all the cruel things that he was doing at HomeAway and some scary things that would happen not because of HomeAway, just because of dealing with data. So I think that was kind of like, it would be just fun to have this chat and kind of just share stories from the trenches. That was kind of
Yeah.
nice today.
It seems like you've seen it all, and you've gotten some good scar tissue around a lot of different use cases. So would love to chat with you about, you know, some of the best practices and some of the nightmare stories.
Sure. Yeah, no. I mean, and like, it's so, as Juan said, I was at HomeAway, which if you're not familiar with HomeAway, it's now been rebranded as Vrbo. It's a vacation rental website brand. It's actually owned by Expedia Group. I was there for a decade to the day. I actually was literally, when I was thinking about leaving and starting data.world, I realized that it was awful close to my 10-year anniversary. And so I just orchestrated it to make sure that my last day was 10 years to the day. It was kind of poetic. It was good. It was great run. Really, I was there from very early. I didn't found HomeAway, but I was there from very very early on through going public in 2011, and then ultimately selling the company to Expedia right before I left to start data.world. What was interesting, kind of from like a just data, it was an interesting decade to spend doing what we were doing there. What's interesting about HomeAway from a technology point of view was it was a roll-up company from the beginning, right? From the very beginning, like the hypothesis of the company was there's this huge fragmented market, lots of little regional players, no one kind of owns this space. VRBO actually was the biggest single player, and they were not that big. And so the idea was, let's go in there and build like a real marketplace, a real kind of, internet scale portal for vacation rentals, and, aggregate a lot of these very small regional players into one marketplace. So that was what we did. And so, I mean, it was really, we were a startup acquiring other startups, right? It wasn't like, when we were a 30-person company and we started buying a lot of companies, we had a stable platform and a clean, schema and model for what vacation rentals looked like. We were figuring it out as we went, and so we acquired 34 companies over the time I was there, which that's not a lot of acquisitions if you're IBM or Oracle, but that's a lot of acquisitions if you're a startup company figuring it out. I mean, if you think about it, that's kind of, if you think about that over 10 years, that's almost an acquisition per quarter, and most of those acquisitions were early days. So there was oftentimes, quarters where we would acquire more than, 1, 2, 3 companies in a quarter while we were working. And so just the data integration challenges were huge, right? Every company had their own tech stack. A lot of these were very small companies, kind of founded by someone who, bought themselves a Teach Yourself Cold Fusion in 21 Days book at Borders and put up a website, and it's not to disparage it. Like, these things worked, and they were functional businesses that made a lot of money, but very few of them were kind of built with any sort of scale in mind at all. And so, a lot of this was really kind of, integrating these companies, learning from these domain experts who kind of understood the business, and trying to extract out the best pieces of, like, what does this data actually mean? What's the same across all of these? What's the same across all these various platforms? What does a proper schema data platform for this company really look like? And then build it, and then retrofit 34 companies along the way to use that and leverage it.
So
I could keep talking forever, but let you guys ask some questions, because
So what was like an easy integration? Like, you thought, oh, this was swift to do, and like we were lucky, but I don't know.
Yeah, I mean, I don't think any of them were easy. I mean, after a while, like, we had the patterns in place. So at some point it started to be like, well, we actually have a playbook. We know how to do it. I mean, there's a whole thing about just how do you acquire and integrate companies, which I'm super opinionated about, but we're going to talk about the data today, because there's all sorts of, like, personnel things that we learned over time how to be good at that. But I mean, the later ones, certainly we had a stable platform. Like, how I think about it, we approached it kind of very iteratively, which I think is always the case as you're trying to, like, model data, model information. The first thing we did in the early days, because we had acquired 6 or 7 companies, and we're just trying to figure out how to be a company ourselves, and so there's all this stuff. We thought about it very much as a syndication problem. Let's leave all these systems alone. Let's assume that these systems are going to keep working the way they work, because they have existing customers with expectations, and let's just figure out a way to normalize all the data in one place, pull it together, and then drive the new brand, HomeAway.com, that we built off of that kind of syndicated. But then over time, we realized that, it's not practical. You can't maintain 30 different ways that people manage their properties. You have to really kind of give people, and then obviously, a problem we started having almost as soon as we started putting these companies together is many of these people were customers of multiple, like we had customer duplication, right? You were a customer of this site and this site and this site. We just bought all three of those sites. Those aren't three separate houses that can be independently listed. They're one property. And, and then another challenge, this is more of a business challenge, but it relates to the data challenge, was most of these companies started off as really kind of a classified ad type site where they're basically listing their properties and then dealing with the transaction offline. And we're trying to move it to be more of a marketplace where you could actually have the expectation of, I go in, I find the place I want, I book it, I swipe my card, it's booked. The notion of keeping like an inventory of bookable nights and actually having reservations be transactional, where when I've booked it over on this site, it's now not available on this other site, was just something that wasn't built into these systems from the beginning. They were kind of built for a very offline type of world. So I think, if I think about the sequence this is obviously very simplistic because we did this over the course of years and these are all big system migrations, but it was first get all the content into a standard syndicated format, then solve that reservations problem where everything works off one calendar. So if I know it's the same house here and here, I can't double book it. Then figure out how we kind of move to a consistent data model from an edit point of view so that everyone's editing through the same interface and can use the same set of tools. And then really it wasn't until probably the last, I was there for 10 years. It probably wasn't until the last 4 years that the norm was everyone kind of editing data in a single unified system and just having kind of different faces to it depending on, which country you were coming from, which site of origin you were coming from. It took, I think, that first 6 years before we really had a comprehensive platform that brought it all together. So then, to answer your question about the easiest one, the last 4 years, it was easier because then we kind of had a playbook. It's like, okay, here's what it's going to look like to take your integration and move it through the process of becoming kind of assimilated to the Borg.
Yeah, at that point, it was less of a sort of whack-a-mole approach or, what's on fire approach or something like that, and more of a, hey, here's the playbook. Like, you guys are going to follow these rules. Like, here's step one, here's step two, that kind of thing, right?
Yeah. What was almost more interesting is like that 10-year period was really when, first big data became a thing and then data science became a thing. And, it was interesting and that where a lot of the kind of, seeds for what, got us thinking about, what a data platform like data.world would offer is, HomeAway is not an old company, right? It started in 2005. But if you think about kind of the timeline of things, it was not a normal thing to, big data was not really a thing then. Hadoop did not really exist. You kind of had the initial kind of, white papers put out around this kind of scalable big data technology that Google and other folks were pushing out, but it didn't exist as a technology you could just download and set up. That happened kind of through our evolution. So we went from a company where that didn't exist to one where that was a norm. Same thing when you kind of think about like a data science team that was not a thing that you had. That kind of, we had to kind of retrofit that onto a little bit more of an old school type of company. And, and it was, and something that we realized was like younger companies that came along, right? The gig economy, the Uber and Lyft and, relevant to us, Airbnb that came around, the companies that started 2010, 2011, they just had this in their DNA, right? They were born into a world where, processing massive data at scale and having a data science team and, having kind of democratized access to your data was just how you do it. And we were, we struggled to catch up, and I think we did really well. I mean, I'm really proud of what we did at HomeAway, but it was a challenge to kind of keep up with these companies that were just a couple years younger than us. And part of what, we started thinking, and John, another one of our co-founders here, was also at HomeAway with me. We started thinking, it's like, if this is hard for us, how impossible is this for like the Fortune 500 or the Global 2000, right? These companies that have been around for 20 years, 30 years, their infrastructure is way more ancient than us. Like we can actually be somewhat agile and kind of catch up and retrofit. But, a 100,000 person insurance company that's been around for 150 years cannot possibly think about being competitive in this world. And that's where the idea for something like data.world came around. It was like, what if you could kind of have a, SaaS platform that could really kind of help, synthesize a lot of disparate data sources, make sense of it, and give everyone in the company the ability to kind of interact with that data and make sense of it.
So how did you guys start with, I mean, you were talking like that first step was come up with like what you call the syndicated model, right? And you have to get agreements about coming up with that model and how it agrees with other sources that you're integrating. What was that process? Because that's something that everybody will complain about, right? Okay, how you can never agree what a customer means or whatever property means. Like, how did you define what was a property and stuff like that? Like, what was that process to come up with that syndicated model?
Yeah, I mean, I think the fortunate position we were in is we kind of developed that, and there's always kind of two sides of this. There's the fortunate and the unfortunate part of it. The fortunate was we were still a startup when we were figuring that out. The whole company was, maybe 50 people, including those first couple of acquisitions. So, we had a very aggressive timeline to kind of get the first version of a unified site that kind of brought that all together out. And we kind of had carte blanche to decide what we needed to do that. So a very small number of people got to kind of really throw their opinions in the ring there and figure out what that initial definition of kind of our unified listing model looked like. Again, for good and bad. For good, because we were able to move at kind of very rapid scale. We got that done in, really a couple months from, hey, we need to unify all this to launching the site. The bad is, that group of people, of which I was one, it's too small a group of people, and I wasn't I wasn't a deep industry expert at that point, right? I had not, I'd been thinking about vacation rentals for all of a year or less by the time we kind of launched that. So, the downside of being able to move quickly and with that much agility was we got some things wrong and had to kind of fix it later on, which, so I know what you're saying, Juan, because this is something we deal with a lot when we're kind of dealing with like larger corporations now. Is like sometimes there's that analysis paralysis of in order to kind of move forward any sort of like synthesized model like this, you have to bring so many stakeholders to bear. That wasn't our problem then. If anything, we had a little bit the opposite problem of we were able and empowered to cowboy it a little bit, and so we did, which was great. It was the right thing because it got us live. And it got what we needed done. And it meant that, one thing I love to tell people, which is, this is a joke, but it's a joke, but that's 100% real, is that, as we kind of learned a lot more about this industry, there's certain things you just wouldn't think are complex that are super complex when you think about travel on an international scale. So one of the engineers who worked there, and I won't say his name just in case he's listening here. Not that there's like, but he ended up writing. We kind of joked about it, but he wrote the treatise on describing bathrooms internationally. And there's even kind of like a subtlety embedded in what I said, because like, what you think of as an American as a bathroom, right? We have all kinds of concepts like a half bathroom, which you would think of as like a room with a toilet and a sink in it. Well, that's to Europeans, for example, that's not a bathroom at all. There's no bathtub in that room. How the hell can you call it a bathroom, right? It's a toilet, it's a water closet, and so the notion of like this, what he really did, in terms of, you and I talk about all the time, Juan, is he built kind of an ontology of plumbed rooms in the house where, we're trying to basically map the way somebody who's listing a house in America describes the rooms that contain sinks, toilets, bathrooms, and showers in some combination to the way somebody in Europe would list it, the way somebody in Asia would list it. And, the reality is, trying to map these things is darn near impossible because, and it's funny, all these kind of, not to hanker too much on bathrooms, but like it kind of is illustrative of like the kind of problems that appear in every industry. We kind of came down to, well, the best thing we could do if we can get everyone to do it would be for each room, tell us what features it has, right? Does this room have a sink? Yes or no? Does it have a standalone shower? Yes or no? Does it have a bathtub? Yes or no? Can that bathtub also be used as a shower?
That's a trade-off, right? How high level do I want to go, or do I go become granular? And that will ease the integration of the data, if depending on the level of granularity.
Exactly that, right? If we could get everyone to kind of like give an identifier to every room in their house and then list out with detail what features they have, well, then we could describe it in every language to every possible traveler. But the reality is that that's not how people interface with the data. They're going to give you their kind of shorthand. And so we had kind of very complicated rules for saying, and I felt this firsthand. I was traveling in Europe, and the apartment we stayed in Paris, it absolutely did not have the facilities that we thought it had. It wasn't, nobody was trying to misrepresent it, but it was just, at the end of the day, the way that these rooms are described is fundamentally different between cultures.
That's fascinating. It makes you realize how much data integration isn't just a sort of a technology problem, right? It's a problem of sort of understanding, of semantics, of business process, of people, and the bigger the problem space, the harder it is.
So I guess this is what I'm currently passionate about. Is it's a people problem too, right? This is a cultural thing. I don't know what sort of automation can ever figure this out by itself, right? You need to be able to have some sort of the human aspect involved in there, and you need to figure out how to scale this type of stuff. But so what was I don't know, is it a tool or an approach or something that you guys did that actually helped you become, when you said like the last 4 years was easy, like what was like that deliverable or that you guys built that you said, okay, now life seems to be easier? What was that?
And is it something that, other companies can replicate, or is it super specific to HomeAway?
Yeah, I mean, I think, the specific details of it, I think were, pretty specific to our situation, our evolution. But I mean, the basic principle was pretty much kind of what I've already said. It's, I get with everything, kind of find an iterative approach that lets you kind of attack one piece of the problem at a time. And so for us, how we did that, how we did it was that first version of what we did, we defined a unified model for data and syndicated it into one place where we could kind of drive, we had one unified picture of the total inventory we had at any given time. I could tell you every listing on every one of our sites. And, a key aspect of that was just also, and this is going to sound weird, but I think this is really important to data integrations. Also, that system had an inherent acknowledgement that it was going to sometimes be wrong. Like sometimes I will have two separate listings that actually represent the same house and I won't know it yet. And so there had to be a way to say, like, at some point I thought these were two separate houses that could be independently booked, and now I know they're one. And similarly, there had to be a notion that I thought these were the same house, but actually they turned out to be different. So there's a whole temporal notion to it that I think is critical when you're integrating multiple data sources. If your system is rigid and that, like, I have to know the whole truth at all times or the whole system breaks, well, then your system's going to break, because data is messy and it's going to come from a lot of different sources. And in the real world, we felt it acutely because we acquired so many companies, but I think every single company has this, whether they admit it or not. But the first step was, build that unified model, build a single picture of inventory, build that unified calendaring system where, I had the rule that, as long as no system could be no night could be double booked for the same house. After that, then, we realized then we were in a situation where we still had, and it wasn't 34 by then, but it was 20 different systems that people independently logged into to edit their listings. And so I had 20 different ways that you could go in and change your listing. And then I could normalize those on the back end to say, well, they all look the same to the travelers, but it was obviously hugely inefficient. If we wanted to launch a new feature to say, hey, people who own properties, here's a new thing that you can do with your property, we would literally have to go implement that 20 times. Or more realistically, what would happen is we would implement it 4 times for the 4 large brands, and everyone who was a customer of all the other brands, we would tell them, well, sorry, but there's not enough of you to matter. Come on over to these major, and again, there's lots of different nuances in play, but ultimately it worked out kind of like that. But ultimately we realized, like, this is dumb. Even doing it 4 times is too much. And so what we did, and I don't think this is the one size fits all for everybody, but what we did there, which worked really well, was we basically put an API abstraction layer. So what we did was we basically said, let's design the API for managing these kind of unified listing models that we would want to go build if we were building this from scratch. And then let's implement it as a proxy to these N underlying systems. So we still had to go implement, adapters that would let you kind of write to one API. But what we did was we basically said, let's carve the problem up into above the line. Anyone implementing new features to roll out to our customers has to use this API. You may no longer write directly to these databases. They're hidden from you. It's as though they don't exist anymore. You have to talk to this API. And then on the back end, it's like everyone who's kind of the manager of these back end systems, your job is to, whenever a feature request comes in to implement to this API, or you got to implement it against your backend system. And that let us basically that let us basically make investments above the line of like, you can build new features all day long, but you have to use this interface. Below the line, we could invest as much as we wanted to into platform consolidation, because no longer was anyone above the line even aware there were 20 different systems. They're like, there is an API I talk to, and I don't care how many systems. So then we would have whole teams of people whose job was basically system consolidation back here. But like, let's just say we don't want to have 20 databases back here. We want to have, next year we want to have 10. Let's get rid of the 10 longest tail ones. Then we want to have 5. Then we want to have 2. Ultimately, the goal is we want to have 1, right? Ultimately, it'd be perfect if we just had one clean data model all the way down. And we certainly weren't there by the time I left home away, and I don't know that they ever got there. But at some point you don't have to get 100% of the way there too, right? Like it's fine. There's a kind of, again, our whole lens on it, which was a very kind of, business oriented, like what kind of technology project can I get approved, right? Because if you look at it through the lens of like, what's the most technologically pure thing I can build, that's fine, but that's not necessarily the most practical. We looked at it from the lens of like, let's make this purely cost benefit trade-off. By drawing this hard, sharp line, the business could invest all day long in as many product features as they wanted, as long as they followed this architectural rule. And then we could funnel all of our kind of R&D investment into making the platform more robust, into cleaning up behind that line. And as long as we maintain that objective. So that was how we did it. It was kind of the high level strategy. It worked extremely well. I recommend that strategy. The details of it may not work the same for every organization.
So then another big topic on integration is, so you have schema matching, making sure these 2 columns or whatever match. The other one is record linkage, instance matching, and for your related properties. How did you guys manage that? I mean, how much could you automate everything? How much, or is it you just have to live with dirty data?
Like I said, the system, first of all, was architected to be capable of living with dirty data, because sometimes you just can't avoid it. But we had manual processes that people go in and individually fix in certain records, which, sounds like it doesn't scale that well, but honestly, in a whole universe of, a few million properties, and the reality is the vast majority of them are like single sourced, so there actually is no duplication. It's actually practical to think that you could actually hand touch a significant majority of the duped ones and fix them over time. And then we had a lot of automation. I don't think we had any, certainly in my time there, and I haven't been there for 5 years, so who knows how much more sophisticated things have kind of come on. But in my time, we didn't have anything that I think was like, needle moving in terms of like automated entity matching. We did a good job of kind of heuristic rules. I think, this is really relevant to data.world and to, interests that you and I both have, Juan. Like, a lot of the patterns I started seeing, were things that have been kind of well worn and well solved in kind of the semantic web world, right? Like this is what, RDF was kind of built for, as a graph data model for integrated data with like built-in semantics. And I think what we did there was basically come as close to that as we could with kind of the mainstream technology that was available to us that we could really reasonably adopt. And, I think that was a lot of the seed for like why we built data.world and why we built the way we did was, I think what I saw was a huge opportunity to kind of take this technology that is really great for this purpose, but maybe doesn't have a lot of kind of mainstream technology, a lot of mainstream adoption, a lot of mainstream kind of support around it, and build a platform that leveraged it to solve that problem. So I don't know if that's full answer to what you're asking, but.
So we're up to the half an hour and 40 seconds. Before we turn off the recording and stuff, what are the top 1, 2, 3 things that you would recommend people when they're integrating data? Like do something or do not something. What are your top 3?
And maybe a bonus question on that is, and where do you see catalog fitting in?
It wouldn't be nice. Well played, Tim. No, yeah, I think, but I do think that's it. And it's actually very related. The answer is, the data, integrating multiple data feeds. It really comes down to, at the end of the day, data are a collection of facts about the world. It's a collection of data points, and the specific structure of tables and feeds and the physical systems. All of that is, to some degree, it's all noise, right? Like in a perfect world, none of that would actually matter at all. And so, how I think about it is very much like, get to the bottom of what the data means. What's the cleanest kind of model and conceptual model you can build of the facts that are being presented. The hard problems that, there's really no kind of clear automation available for, to Juan's point earlier, are going to be like normalizing vocabularies and taxonomies, right? Where you're referring, where those data sets are referring to structured collections of facts, enumerated facts, mapping those to one another is always going to be one of the biggest challenges, and it's going to be one of the hardest things to automate. So like those are the things to tackle, kind of understanding conceptually what the schema is. And then, because, if you're integrating 2, 3, 4 systems, assume under most circumstances, you can assume you're going to integrate 10, 15, you're going to be integrating a lot of systems. You can't point to point integrate all those systems. So you need to think in a hub and spoke model. And so you have to think about, how do I take everything down to some normalized form and then go from that normalized form back to all the ways I need to export data? And ultimately, that's exactly kind of the core of the technical approach we took through all the things we did at HomeAway, which turned out to be very, very successful and let us aggregate that business and make it huge. And it's exactly core to the approach that we take here for how we kind of think about integrating an entire organization's data into their data catalog.